Thanks for giving some time to listen to me. I'm going to talk about the future of DevOps in the digital age, and I'm going to try to make it a little interesting. We'll talk about some areas that have evolved, and we'll also talk about some new dimensions and methodologies that have come out. And I'll also try to point you towards some solutions. Not necessarily CA. Some of them could be joint solutions with partners, ecosystem, etc. Because in today's industry, no one OEM or vendor can claim to solve all the problems. I'll at least try to kind of get that thought buds going. Let's start with the software business. And this message has been beaten down to death from today morning till yesterday. But it is important to start with this context, because everything that we are going to talk about is in this context. We are going to talk about how software has changed the world and how software has eaten up the world, right? We had the born digital companies that everybody keeps talking about, the Netflixes, the Ubers, and the Facebooks of the world. But we are increasingly seeing, and that could be a message that resonates with many of you in the room, is about transforming digital companies. Companies like United, companies like Samsung, companies like GM, who are not born digital companies, but who are transforming digital because of the way software is changing the way they do business and new business models that gets developed. There are two different aspects, because if you're born digital, your ability to continue being digital and establish digital practices becomes much more easier, because you don't have 20, 30, 50, 100 years of legacy systems to carry. But if you're transforming to digital, it's a whole new different ball game, right? Because you have to then look at a lot of other aspects that others do not have to. So we will talk about that difference. Let's talk about change. I strongly believe that change gives you an opportunity to actually relook at some of the stuff that you've been doing for a long time. And in IT, we all know there are pockets of excellence, and there are pockets of areas that we are not doing that good. Every time a transformation initiative comes along the way, every time there is a change in the way we do business or the way we set up IT, we try to block those holes, right? So it is very important to look at change in a way by which how can you be built for change, rather than how can you sustain change, right? So let's talk about change. What is changing? Consumer behavior is changing, right? We all are very aware about brand loyalty. We all have our brand loyalties in our lives, right? The airline that you prefer, the hotel that you prefer, even the little kirana shop that we prefer. There are loyalties associated with our lives for various reasons. Not all of them are commercial loyalties. Some of them are emotional loyalties. Some of them are brand loyalties. Some of them are loyalties because of the services that they provide. That loyalty, which is brick and mortar loyalty to a brand, is slowly moving into experience loyalty, right? Today, how do you decide between whether you want to order through Swiggy or Foodpanda? The experience that a Swiggy provides or a Foodpanda provides. Not a brand, whether Foodpanda has many advertisements or Swiggy has many advertisements. Slowly, for hotel industry, for airline industry, in the US, the brand loyalty between United, American Airlines, Delta, those three big players, the brand loyalty is slowly going away from the Gen X generation by the experience that they provide, both in terms of how easily you can book, how can you check in, etc., etc., etc. So that behavior is very interesting, because people who are using technology to create experience loyalty have to deal with change, right? For example, Tesla, right? Tesla has 100 million lines of code in their version. Now, it is an interesting technology artifact that they have so many lines of code. But what's the business experience artifact there? The business experience artifact is you don't have to go to service center every alternate month or every 6 months. That's the experience that they're bringing in with the technology change, right? Now, what is the competition doing? Mercedes-Benz is including a navigation system that has got that software enriched, right? And there are many others. Honda is doing it, General Motors are doing it. So connected and contextual experience loyalty is what they're bringing, because they believe people are no longer going to get associated with Mercedes as a brand, BMW as a brand. Why? Because Tesla has changed the rules of the game there. It happens in all our lives every day. And that's where consumer behavior is very important. Now, what is the resultant of that? The resultant of that is the architecture by which each of our applications are built have also undergone a change. Earlier, we used to build monolithic, big, tightly coupled applications. And the motto was, it should not fail for the next 15 years. And it should survive an earthquake, 20,000 people, everything. We would do HA, we would do DR, we would do DR on HA, all kinds of possible high availability replication solutions, and that's your application. And then you run your business with that. But with this change and with the ability to respond to market forces, architectures like microservices, like cloud, etc. came into picture. So with microservices, what we are saying is, don't create monolithic application, make it loosely coupled. Why? Because tomorrow I may need to take one particular component out of it and fix in another component. For example, today my application is catering to a particular set of market that requires my application to be working in an Android phone. Tomorrow I may want to upgrade that to an iOS phone because the market segment that I'm tracking is changing. So I need my application components to be changeable, right? So that created this whole requirement of how you can do this faster. So now we're talking about bringing applications to market quickly. We've all heard about different examples. The one that I really like is the example from Intuit. The head of Intuit. Intuit is a tax agency in US, much like our GSTN. The difference is they are into direct taxes, right? They are the single entry point for everybody in the US to file their taxes. Scott, who heads the Intuit operations, says that he does more than 150 live experiments in their system in the peak season, when the tax filing is in the peak, at the 3 months of the peak. Now that's very interesting because they have the ability and the confidence to do that in the peak season, because in the peak season you will know the response time, you will know the behavior, you will know a lot of things that you will not find in testing kind of a scenario. They have the ability to do that. Why do they have the ability to do that? Because their processes, their ability of, their way of making applications to production, their way of releasing applications, the way of testing applications has matured to a level that they have the confidence to do that. Now that means that they can now respond to market changes faster. The last is on reliability and resilience, and I talked about this. We used to build applications so that they are reliable all the time. Now, we are going to build applications that are designed for failure. Not make the application and then make it resilient and reliable. The difference, again, microservices example. If you build container-based applications with multiple microservices, you build in the ability for one component to take over the services of the other component in the application itself, in the software itself, not by putting HA, DR, multiple data centers and create a larger ecosystem in terms of failure. What does that mean? That means applications are more horizontally scalable. Applications are engineered for scale and growth at the design time itself. Now what does that mean? That means that all of these changes are making organizations who are running businesses dependent on software to change. Beautiful quote from Jack Welch. I just love this. If the rate of change in the outside is faster than what is happening in the inside your organization, the end is in sight. How true? You look at the examples of companies that do not exist 20 years ago, that existed 20 years ago and do not exist today. Nokia, very good example, right? Many, right? I'm sure each one of you can bring your own examples. If you don't understand what is happening outside, and if that rate of change is faster than how you are transforming internally, how you are looking at your business processes, then the end is in sight. And this is Jack Welch 15, 20 years ago. Big visionary. I just completely agree with this quote. And hence the modern software factory. Hence the context of modern software factory that Stephen brought about how can you build new ideas and how can you productize them and come with a minimum viable product in the lowest amount of time with the maximum quality with minimal bugs or errors, right? It enables you to make sure that you can adapt and change to market forces and meet customer demand in an agile way. So, but this is the blueprint, right? This is about best practices in that you need to adopt in agile, in DevOps, in security, etc. And I'm sure you've seen the message earlier in multiple slides. The question is, we're standing on the other end of the cliff and calling each one of you saying, come over here. You're sitting out there and asking how, right? It is a valid question, right? We're making this modern software factory, we're explaining this modern software factory saying, this is what is required for you to be agile. This is what is required for you to meet market demand to scale. I'm sure many of you over the last 12 hours have been digesting the message and saying, where do I start? What do I do? Right? Because for you it is a cliff, and it's primarily because of the first slide that I put is about transforming an existing system versus born digital. A lot of born digital companies are probably in the middle, not exactly in the middle, but towards the side of this side of the house. So let's, in the next maybe 20 minutes, I'll try to talk about a couple of areas that can help. Not everything, but a couple of areas that can help. Let's talk about idea, innovation, time to market. There is definitely pressure on each one of you to accelerate innovation, to make sure that you create new business models, you create new software, you create new applications, you create new releases to respond to business requirements. Forrester did a study a couple of years ago, and it said that only 8% of new software idea sees the light of the day and get users to adopt it in less than 3 months. Only 8%. Think of this, right? If you have created 10 projects to transform your business, only 8% of that actually reaches the users. What's the reason? The reason is innovation in itself is good when you innovate from a product idea. But when you convert that product idea to a result, an outcome that users can use, you have to pass through a chain of activities, including development, build, release, production, etc. And you get stuck there, right? So I'm going to talk about a specific aspect of the modern software factory that you heard, which is build better apps faster. This is going to be the theme of what I'm going to talk about for the next 20 minutes. What should you look at when you want to build better apps faster? Because if only 8% of your ideas reach users, if you improve it by 10%, you're already probably doubling the amount of ideas that you bring to market, right? So, what are the customer expectations or user expectations when you want to build applications faster? User experience is a big part of applications that you're bringing to market faster. Applications are not, we are living in a world of instant gratifications, right? Where if you're not getting an instant gratification for an application transaction that you're doing, or an experience or a download experience that you're having, you're going to most likely discard that application. 25% of all users discard applications in one use. Imagine going through all that cycle from idea to outcome and then having your user discard that application in just in one download. Velocity, 50% improvement in time to market through agile practices. This is proven. Everybody knows this, right? But that's a motherhood statement, that agile practices can improve your faster time to market. How? Where exactly? Right? We're going to talk about it. Quality. In all this speed, in all this change, if the quality of the system or the application that you're bringing in front of the users, if that doesn't meet the demands of the user, you're definitely doomed to fail. 57% of organizations who want to actually build applications to market faster are still facing a testing bottleneck. Why? Because they want to test all possible scenarios, all users, all use cases, and that takes time. It just takes time, just takes people, speed reduces, cost increases, etc. Right? And like I said, cost is another example. So these are challenges, big challenges, right? We're talking about moving things faster, we're talking about building more releases, we're talking about making sure that applications reach faster, but these are impediments that slow you down. The reason, there's also a fundamental argument around DevOps here, right? And I want to talk about this for a little bit because all of you understand this in some shape or form. DevOps is a very strong, is a very important topic in many areas these days. People define DevOps as product, people define DevOps as culture, people define DevOps as a SKU that they can buy from the shop. Different people, different expectations. But essentially, what the methodology around DevOps is closer collaboration between development and operations. And why is it required? Because the development side of the house, the software development side of the house is all about speed, is all about generating applications faster, is all about adopting new technologies, is all about how can you create Docker applications, Node.js applications, how can we adopt AngularJS for this new UI, etc., etc. They are very dynamic. Right? They are the young punk kids from college who come out and then learn new stuff and want to try on their applications. That is that crowd, right? Whether you outsource your development to a large SI like HCL, Infosys, TCS, or whether you do your development in-house, that is the reality of the kind of developers that we have. Right? So they are very agile, they're very lean, they're very nimble, they're very dynamic, they want to change things faster. Look at the operations side of the house. Right? Operations side of the house is all about stability. They don't want any change. I don't want to be called at 2 a.m. in the night saying, oh, you deployed that release and that release is not working, please come to office right now. For 20, 30, 50 years, we have told them to be stable. The system has said, anything you can do, make sure that your operations do not suffer. Look at big banks, look at big telecommunications. What was their #1 motto by the CIO? Never fail that critical billing app. It should not fail. So they made a system that is stable. Now what is the fundamental rule of stability in 20 years ago? Don't change. We just established that if you don't change, the end is near. So you have conflicting marriage made in heaven here. Right? Dev who wants to change all the time and ops who doesn't want to change. How do you make them change? Right? And a lot of this is, which is the reason why a lot of people confuse this about process, this is about culture. So it's all there, it's all part of DevOps, right? It is also about how technology enables you to break this barrier. How technology enables you to make sure that the dev and ops teams are operating together to achieve the idea to outcome journey, right? And that's essentially DevOps. And that's essentially DevOps, so see, and that's the mantra by which we develop our DevOps solutions. Agile. Now, Agile is this buzzword that everybody wants to use. I love Agile, by the way. I think it's useful, and I think it makes organizations move faster. Different people have different definitions for Agile, and I'm sure all of you would have heard this, right? Some people say that I have moved certain projects, development projects from waterfall to Agile, so I'm Agile. Really, not exactly. Some people say I have daily stand-ups, so I am Agile. No. If you have 5 Scrum Masters in the organization, are you Agile? I don't think so. If the product owner is part of the team, which is supposed to be a very important Agile principle, is that a definition of Agile? Not exactly. So everybody talks and walks Agile. There are big posters in every cubicle saying, oh, we are looking at Agile. Does that make you Agile? Not necessarily. Right? Agile. Let me talk about Agile and DevOps and how people confuse it, and I want to just make sure that all of you understand this clearly. In any idea to outcome process, there are 3 most important boxes. Idea, business requirements, somebody in the business puts them. Dev, set of punks, really well smart dressed, happy-go-lucky chaps who come and develop this, and operations guys who run the system or make the outcome possible. The area where business requirements gets translated into developments, and how do you do it, right? How do you take business requirement and initiate a project? That is Agile. That is where agile helps you. That's where agile plays a important role. When you say you are agile, your first question should be, can I change the fundamental requirement of my application 50 days after the development is kicked off? If you can and still not miss your deadline, you are agile. So agile is about how you can be, how your business requirement, your change in business requirements can work even if it can not impact your development, how they operate. DevOps is about how your development passes on what they develop to the operations. The traditional thing is developer develops something, takes up, throws it across the wall, say your problem made, bye, and I am on to the next project. That's the traditional way of how development and operations work. DevOps is about how they can work together so that we can have a joint ownership of how code moves from code to application to outcome. That journey is defined by DevOps. Do you need one, or is one better than the other? Absolutely not. You need both. We just established business requirements change, applications change. Change is the constant thing in the world. So you need to be agile. But if you are agile and your DevOps technology, your DevOps foundation is not there, that piece works very well. Development develops code, but it never sees the light of the day. 8% only sees the light of the day. So you need both. Right? I believe this slide establishes fundamental shift that you need to bring in each of your organizations in, and now you can think of which areas you need to work on for agile, which areas you need to work on for DevOps. I'm going to focus on the DevOps side. This one I found in projectcartoon.com. Very interesting. I'm sure most of you have gone through this, and I'm sure nobody is going to be surprised about this. When a customer explains a requirement, it looks like this, right there. Right, the first one. Oops. It looks like a ladder with a swinging thing. Then somebody comes in and explains it to the project leader, the agile side of the story. This is how the project leader understood it. And then the analyst who designed it, the programmer who wrote it, right? The beta testers who received, who want to test that. The business consultant, the sales guy, right, like me, who sold it. The documentation of the product, and what exactly operations installed after the customer bought it. Right? If you ask one person in this box, he will have an input and he will have an output, and you will never be able to blame that person. He exactly did what he was told. Right? You ask the ops guy, why is my chair not looking like this? He says, this is the code that I got, I installed it, this is what you get, I am fine. You will never be able to find the fault. But if you step back and you look at this picture, you know where the challenges are. How do you think that user is going to react when he was promised this, and when he asked for that, promised this, and got this? Experience is not going to be a topic that you want to talk to that customer, right? He's not going to be very happy about this. That is because, why does this happen? The user always knows what they want, so they explain this, either in an email, in an Excel sheet, in various shape and form, right? The business analyst then converts the user requirement into business terms, saying this is why we need to do it, lost in translation. Right? The programmer then talks to the user, mostly to the business analyst, understands it in a different way, and writes a code. The tester tests for the functions that's supposed to be written by the programmer, but he tests the code in a shape and form that is like this. And if you look at the diversion, you look at the exact area that they covered for the user, it's only this. Right? This is the only portion that is common to all of them. Ideally, you want to get to here. Ideally, you want this, that the user defines something, the business analyst translates it, the programmer writes exactly as, and the tester tests exactly this, which is aligned with this, which is aligned with this. How do you do that? Is it possible for a programmer to go back to the user every time? Probably not. Is it possible for the tester to go back to user every time, saying that I have prepared this test cases, can you validate this is exactly what you want? Probably not. He is going to go back to the analyst or to the programmer saying, what did you develop? Let me create the test cases accordingly. Okay? But this is exactly where DevOps helps. This is where some of the new area that has been developed in the last couple of years, few years, that will bring value to you, how you can align the clarity and vision during development. So I talked about development being evolved and testing being a laggard in that, right? Why? Because, like I said, development, there are new technologies that people are developing. In testing, typically, what are the critical issues that people face? One is that there are delays, right? There are delays in the testing stage. I am not able to test, I don't have the data, I don't have the user requirement, my test cases are long, my guys went on leave, my contractor did not supply the guys for test cases writing, etc., etc., etc. In the entire cycle, if testing takes 50% of your wait time, then that is 50% of time that you have lost in from ideas to outcome. The other is about dev environments, dev and test environments. You always want to look at test environment, dev environment, where do I test? Because you want to reach here, right? If you want to reach here, you want to test exactly what the user needs. But do you have access to what exactly have the users? If you're a bank, do you have access to the mainframe with all the customer records, with all different type of customer data? Probably not. So that makes your testing longer, that makes your entire journey longer. Automation is the other area that you struggle with, right? A lot of people struggle with automation. You still have manual test cases written, you still have manual execution, you still have manual intervention in many of the processes that you do in testing. Which is where I want to introduce to you a concept of continuous testing, right? In industry, this is called test driven development also, right? TDD, where testing because it's been clearly isolated that testing is the biggest bottleneck in the entire chain before it reaches operations. So there is this evolution of the area which we call continuous testing, where across every activity in SDLC, in the software development lifecycle, testing is introduced across every activity. When you are doing business requirements, when you are coding, when you are releasing, when you are operating, across every activity, you introduce testing. So it doesn't become development develops the code and then you have 6 months of testing. Functional testing, regression testing, unit testing, integration testing, component testing, that testing, it takes 6 months, right? How do you avoid that? Because if that is the biggest bottleneck, how do you avoid that? By continuous testing. Let me talk about a couple of issues that continuous testing solves. One, in the past 30 years, testing has been like this, right? You define the need, you write a set of requirements, then somebody reads it, there is an automated test case regression, identify the internal, external interfaces that you need to test, write the test data, write the test cases, big requirement, create traceability metrics saying that this requirement is tested by this requirement is tested by this, find the test data so that I can run it, enable the interfaces, whatever way it is, execute the test cases, create the defect, give it to development. This has been the way for the past 30, 50 years testing is run, right? This is the reason why it takes 6 months. This is the reason why that becomes 50% of your time. What you can do is to automate the whole process after requirements are analyzed till execution of test cases. And I'll talk about this piece later. But you can do the whole thing automated using some of the new evolved technologies, which is around model-based testing, where you model requirements and use the model to automate generation of test cases, execution of test cases, running of test cases, etc. And let's go back to the original conversation about agile. In the middle of that process of development, somebody comes and says, oh, by the way, my requirement 4 is changed. In the original example, you start from here again. Your 6 weeks just went 12. Why? Because you want to do all that activity for new test cases. In this case, you just change the model, right? So it becomes much more collaborative between the business users who are defining the requirement, the developers who are developing it, and the testers who are testing. That's about changing the game through model-based testing, an area that has got a lot of traction these days in testing houses. The other I kind of briefly covered is about lack of access to testing environments. At least for 5 of you in here, we are having conversations about this. So many of you know already this is a problem. Wait times, about the development or test teams having to wait for the systems to be available. Testing earlier in the life cycle, right? Like I said, you want to continuous testing is about testing at every possible point so that you don't have to wait for that testing time. Environment demands about performance of the environment. So for example, if you have a mainframe running with your banking system, if that mainframe requires a specific set of responses, right, in terms of load, peak load demand, in terms of scalability, in terms of performance, etc., how do you mimic that? Right? So some of the area about how do you introduce testing at every stages of SDLC. Enter service virtualization, which is a new concept about how do you virtualize services. Right? Everywhere bottlenecks are about I can't do anything unless I have the entire system, and you will never have the entire system. Right? So you have system constraints, data constraints, cost constraints, and development constraints. Let's look at this application. Right? You have an application that you are developing in the middle with a enterprise service bus, and you have a set of systems in the back end which you want to kind of integrate with. Let's call it order management. Right? If your order management system has to undergo a change, and if there is a development activity or a testing activity that is going on for an order management system, which integrates with the mainframe, some system of record, ERP, some SaaS APIs, cloud-based systems, etc., the guys who are doing the development in the order management system will want to test against each one of this, including the service bus. Now, is it possible to create this environment? Yes, if you have a ton lot of money and then you are ready to lavishly give out money to all vendors in the industry, absolutely you can create 3 such models, but not possible in today's environment. What do you do typically? In every one of your houses, you create scripts. You create a mainframe script. You create a system of record system, right? You create mockups, stubs, and test against it. What are the problems with mockups and stubs? One, you need another set of 10 people to maintain that. 2, they're very static, right? If the main system changes, you have to come back and change the stub. 3, they're very difficult to maintain and manage. Stubs only mimic responses that you write in. For example, if your account name has got 13 characters and if the 14th character is not required, you need to write that logic into the stub, right? Then stub a response like that. Tomorrow, if that 13 becomes 14, you got to go and change the stub. Right? So those are issues with the stub. Enter service virtualization, which is the concept of wind tunnel. If you're familiar with racing, Formula 1 racing, Formula 1 cars gets defined in wind tunnels. The exact behavior of aerodynamic behavior of a car is tested in a wind tunnel before it is released on the track. Right? People spend millions on the wind tunnel to make wind tunnel responses exactly similar to corner speeding, straight line speeding, braking performance, performance behind another car, front wing, rear wing, etc. Why do they do that? Because they don't get too much time to run on the track and test. They just get 1 week or 2 weeks. They spend millions of hours in wind tunnels. The wind tunnel gives you mimicked responses of a car in the track, which is exactly what service virtualization does. You can make it as intelligent as you can, right? Then what service virtualization does is it basically creates stubs, like stubs, but with intelligence in terms of request and responses. Right? It also can give you performance related impact. For example, if the number of users hitting that mainframe goes about 90%, the response of the mainframe slows. How do you mimic that? Right? You have to get the performance characteristics from mainframe, put it in service virtualization, it will enable you to mimic that. Right? So that you can write your code to allow for that wait time for the response, so that your application do not time out, for example. So some of those areas. The last gap that I want to talk about is about test data, right? The availability of test data, and I'm not going to go through each one of them. How often are you struggling for test data? Are you looking at these problems, some of these problems? The file is complex, the file is not there, the system needs many weeks to find the right data, etc., etc., etc. Most of the organizations do a production refresh for the test data, get the data from the production, subset it for the test team, mask it to take all the difficult and incriminatory user-based information, and give it to the testing team. What happens? Testing team gets either stale data, wrong data, sometimes no data for negative scenarios, difficult scenarios, rare scenarios, and then the testing team uses that data for 3 months, 6 months, that data gets stale. So you are doing happy path testing, you are doing things that are very nice, but you are actually not testing for what you should be testing, right? So this is an area that is struggling with a lot of people. Yes, the other area where test data becomes difficult is when you are operating across geographical boundaries, about I cannot get data from another country here, or I cannot do like GDPR guidelines, India has guidelines, other countries have guidelines that data cannot be imported out. And then you face other challenges how to access those data, right? I'll move faster on this. The question is, how do you automate this process so that, again, that 6 weeks, 8 weeks of delay is reduced. So if you do this, what's in it for you, right? What are we looking at? We talked about 3 things: speed, quality, and cost. How does this enhance your speed? How does this increase your quality? How does it give you, what ROI do you get? This is a free-form dynamic survey that we did, which basically talked, and we can share this survey. It's available publicly. But essentially, what it said is, if you left shift the testing activity, and if you insert that across all parts of SDLC, there is a chance of you succeeding by 2.5 times, right? If you if you adopt continuous testing and use in all places, in all points in SDLC, you insert testing, there is a 2.5 times, 2.6 times likely to reduce defects by 50%, right? And there's a revenue impact from an ROI standpoint. We can talk about this later if you want more details on this, right? So just wanted to give you an idea of what CA does in this space, right? I'm not going to go into each of the products, but we enable you to look at to have solutions that span across plan, develop, test, release, and operate the whole of the cycles, right? We have technologies that enable you to get the requirements in the agile part of this picture that I showed. When business wants to give a requirement and development wants to get it, how do you do model-based requirements? We have a solution on model-based testing. We have our own service virtualization that I talked about. We have our own test data management that I talked about. We have our ability to do application test so that you can mimic application test. We can do testing in the production side. We can do testing for performance, for responses. We can do security, code security testing from a DevOps standpoint across the DevOps chain. When you're developing, you want to be able to look at security at that stage, not as an afterthought, right? And we can look at operate, which Sushil is going to talk about next, about how operations systems are going to impact your business. So we can cover from plan to develop to test to release to operate. Again, I don't want to go into a product-based session now. We can talk about this later. And some of the impact of how this affects real customers, and this is case studies that we can share. I don't want to go into this again. This is one slide that I want to spend some time. Drinking our own champagne, right? This is something that we have done on our own for our development teams, and maybe Sushil, Sumit, who are from our engineering teams, would be able to speak more about this. Before, when I say before, 3, 5, 7 years ago, we're a product company. Idea to outcome applies to us. products apply to us, changing market applies to us, faster time to market applies to us. All that I said applies to us also because we are a product company. We had one major release in every year earlier with 1 or 2 point releases. Today, we have a release every month. We have beta features in sandbox that you can try on. We have feature focused releases. For a particular feature, we have a release. Suddenly, market came out with this new security guideline in Europe. We have the ability to influence our development stream to incorporate that requirement and still not miss the milestone of our product. Right? We have committed mid-sprint dates. Right? You will get this to try on this date, and we'll give it to that. Why are we able to do that? Why are we able to change, rapidly evolve here? Because we adopt what I just talked about. Right? We cook our own champagne. We drink our own champagne. The service virtualization, agile requirement designer, release automation, we have these products that we use for our own development, in our own development environment. And there are some proof points of this. I'll be able to talk to you about this. If you want to do this, right, if you think this is interesting, how do you engage with us? What's the best way to talk to us? Right? Is to talk to us and see whether you want to do a current state workshop or a future state workshop, depending upon which stage where you are. This is a full day activity almost that involves every part of your organization, right from your planning people, your development people, your testing guys, your release people, your operations team, everybody. Right? We'll pick an application or a system or a set of systems, call everybody who is responsible for the business analyst from a business requirement, call the analyst, call the guy who's developing or the development lead, the test lead, the release management guy, the operation guy who runs the system, bring everybody in the room and do this. Right? This is a live future state workshop that we did with one of the largest telecom company in the US. Right? We do this and we come out with a recommendation report as to what all things that you can do, and that necessarily does not involve everything CA. Some of it has to do with other people, some of it has to do with ecosystem, some of it has to do with your own processes or your own people. Maybe some of it will have to do with some solutions that we discussed. Right? But depending upon which stage of your journey, you could do a current state or a future state workshop. And please talk to us, understand if there is a possibility for us to do this. The success depends upon all those people attending. If you have 2 people from testing attending, it just becomes a product conversation. Right? If you have all of them attending, idea to outcome, how can we reduce? Right? Thank you for your patient listening. I hope you have learned something new today, and I hope we will have some time to have conversations about DevOps and other areas. Thanks, and that's it.